The bullies thought slapping a deaf girl's hands would be an easy target, but they had no idea she'd been perfecting wrestling moves that would leave them flat on their backs and the entire gymnasium in stunned silence. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of Cedar Ridge High School as 17-year-old Maya Chun adjusted the straps of her well-worn messenger bag. October in Colorado brought crisp air and the promise of snow in the mountains. But inside the brick walls of the school, Maya knew she'd face the same suffocating atmosphere she'd endured for the past month since transferring here. Maya stood, just over 5 feet tall, with a compact, athletic build that most people dismissed at first glance. Her straight black hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her clothes dark jeans, a navy hoodie, and scuffed sneakers were chosen for comfort and to avoid drawing attention. What set her apart wasn't immediately visible to casual observers, but those who looked closely might notice how her dark eyes constantly scanned her surroundings, reading lips and watching body language with an intensity that came from years of navigating a hearing world. Born profoundly deaf, Maya had learned early that communication was about far more than spoken words. She could read the micro-expressions that flickered across faces before people composed themselves. She understood the difference between genuine smiles and the polite masks people wore. Most importantly, she had developed an acute awareness of how people moved through space, their intentions often betrayed by their posture long before they acted. The move from San Francisco to Cedar Ridge had been her parents' attempt at a fresh start. Her father, Dr. David Chun, had accepted a position at the local hospital, while her mother, Linda, hoped the smaller community would offer Maya a more supportive environment for her senior year. They had researched the school's disability services and been impressed by the promises of inclusive education and anti-bullying policies. What they hadn't anticipated was how different the reality would be from the glossy brochures and website testimonials. Maya pushed through the main entrance of Cedar Ridge High, immediately feeling the familiar weight of curious stares. The school was smaller than her previous one in San Francisco, which meant there were fewer places to blend in and disappear. Every new face was scrutinized, every difference cataloged and filed away for future reference. The hallways buzzed with the typical Monday morning energy, students catching up on weekend gossip, comparing notes from homework they'd forgotten to complete, and generally projecting the casual confidence that came with belonging. Maya moved through it all like a ghost, her eyes focused on the floor numbers and room assignments she'd memorized over the weekend. Her first period was a P literature with Mrs. Rodriguez, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair who had made an effort to learn basic sign language before Maya's arrival. As Maya entered the classroom, she was grateful to see Mrs. Rodriguez motion toward a seat in the front row where Maya would have a clear view of the teacher's face for lip reading. "Good morning, Maya," Mrs. Rodriguez signed slowly, her movements careful but earnest. "How was your weekend?" "Fine, thank you," Maya signed back, appreciating the teacher's effort, even though her ASL was clearly still in development. As other students filtered into the classroom, Maya became aware of the whispered conversations and sideways glances that followed her presence. She had grown accustomed to being the subject of curiosity. The deaf girl was always noteworthy in predominantly hearing environments, but something about the attention here felt different, more calculating. 3 girls seated in the middle row seemed particularly interested in her presence. The leader of the group was a tall blonde named Ashley Winters, whose designer clothes and perfectly applied makeup suggested she occupied a high position in the school's social hierarchy. Flanking her were 2 loyal followers, Emma Rodriguez, a petite brunette with sharp features and a perpetual smirk, and Jessica Park, a redhead whose friendly appearance masked what Maya was beginning to recognize as a cruel streak. Maya caught fragments of their whispered conversation by reading their lips, a skill that had become second nature over the years. Words like weird, can't even talk normally, and probably faking it, floated between them. Maya's jaw tightened, but she forced herself to focus on Mrs. Rodriguez as the teacher began the lesson on contemporary American poetry. The challenge of lip reading in a classroom setting was something Maya had mastered through years of practice, but it required intense concentration. She had to simultaneously process the visual information of mouth movements, facial expressions, and contextual clues while taking notes and engaging with complex literary concepts. It was mentally exhausting work that left little energy for dealing with social dynamics. When Mrs. Rodriguez asked students to pair up for a discussion exercise, Maya felt the familiar spike of anxiety that came with group activities. In San Francisco, she'd had friends who knew her well enough to communicate naturally, but here she was starting from scratch. She gathered her materials and looked around the room hopefully, only to find that the other students had already formed pairs, leaving her conspicuously alone. Ashley Winters caught her eye and made an exaggerated shrugging gesture as if to say it wasn't her problem that the deaf girl couldn't find a partner. Emma and Jessica giggled at something Ashley whispered, their eyes fixed on Maya with undisguised amusement. Mrs. Rodriguez quickly intervened, pairing Maya with a quiet boy named Thomas, who seemed more interested in staring at his desk than engaging in literary discussion. Maya did her best to participate, writing out her thoughts when her attempts at speech weren't understood, but the exercise felt stilted and awkward. The real trouble began during lunch period. Maya had brought her own lunch from home, a turkey sandwich, an apple, and a thermos of soup, and found an empty table near the windows where natural light would make lip reading easier if anyone tried to talk to her. The cafeteria was a sensory assault of movement, color, and what she imagined must be overwhelming noise. She had learned to appreciate the silence that was her constant companion, especially in chaotic environments like this. She was halfway through her sandwich when Ashley, Emma, and Jessica approached her table. Maya looked up to find Ashley standing directly in front of her, speaking with exaggerated mouth movements that were clearly meant to mock the way deaf people sometimes spoke. "Hi there," Ashley said, her lips overly enunciated. "We wanted to welcome you to our school." Maya set down her sandwich, immediately recognizing the false friendliness in Ashley's expression. She had encountered this type of person before, the kind who disguised cruelty as concern, who found entertainment in others' differences. "Thank you," Maya replied aloud, her voice carrying the slight tonal variations that often marked deaf speakers. She supplemented her words with sign language, partly out of habit and partly to gauge their reactions. Emma immediately began mimicking Maya's hand movements, flailing her arms in random gestures that bore no resemblance to actual ASL. "Oh look, I can do that too," she said with mock excitement. "That's so cool how you wave your hands around," Jessica added with false enthusiasm. "It's like you're conducting an invisible orchestra." Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks but forced herself to remain calm. She had dealt with ignorant comments before, but the deliberate meanness behind these interactions was unmistakable. She picked up her sandwich and took another bite, hoping they would lose interest and move on. Instead, Ashley slid into the seat across from Maya without invitation. "You know, we were wondering," she began, leaning forward with predatory interest. "Do you actually need to do all that hand-waving, or is it just for attention?" Maya's eyes narrowed. She set down her sandwich and signed clearly. "It's called American Sign Language, and it's how I communicate." "But you can talk," Emma pointed out, having moved to Maya's left side. "So why do you need to do the weird hand thing?" "Because I'm deaf," Maya replied, her patience beginning to fray. "Sign language is my primary language." "Prove it," Jessica said suddenly, moving to Maya's right side so that the three girls formed a semicircle around the table. Prove you're actually deaf and not just faking it for special treatment. Maya stared at Jessica in disbelief. Faking it? Yeah, Ashley said, her voice taking on a sharper edge. I mean, how would we know? You could just be pretending so you get extra time on tests and special privileges. Maya felt her heart rate increase, a familiar fight or flight response that she had learned to manage through years of similar confrontations. But something about this situation felt more dangerous than the casual ignorance she usually encountered. These girls weren't just curious or insensitive, they were actively hostile. Enough faking anything, Maya said firmly, though she could hear the slight tremor in her own voice. Well, if you're really deaf, Ashley continued, standing up slowly, then you won't mind if we test it out. Before Maya could react, Ashley reached across the table and clapped her hands loudly right next to Maya's ear. When Maya didn't flinch or turn toward the sound, Ashley's expression shifted to something that looked almost disappointed. Okay, so maybe you really can't hear, Ashley conceded, but I still think all the hand-waving is just for show. Without warning, Emma grabbed Maya's left hand, which had been resting on the table, and held it firmly. Let's see how important these hands really are, she said with a cruel smile. Maya tried to pull her hand away, but Jessica had moved to grab her right hand as well. The two girls held Maya's hands flat against the table while Ashley stood over them with an expression of cold calculation. You know what I think? Ashley said, raising her right hand. I think you use these hands to get sympathy from people. Poor little deaf girl who needs everyone to watch her, wave her hands around. Maya struggled against the girls holding her hands, but their grip was firm. Other students in the cafeteria had begun to notice the commotion, but no one seemed inclined to intervene. Maya could see faces turned in their direction, some curious, others embarrassed for her, but all remaining passive observers to what was clearly escalating into something more serious. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Let go of me, Maya said, her voice rising with anger and fear. Or what? Ashley asked, her hands still raised. You'll tell us? Who's going to believe the weird deaf girl over 3 honor students? Maya's mind raced through her options. She could scream, but would anyone understand why? She could try to break free, but Emma and Jessica were surprisingly strong. Her parents had taught her to seek help from teachers or administrators when faced with bullying, but none were visible in the cafeteria at that moment. What they didn't know, what none of them could have known from looking at Maya's slight frame and quiet demeanor, was that she had been wrestling since she was 8 years old. Her parents had enrolled her in wrestling initially as a way to build confidence and physical strength. They had chosen wrestling specifically because it was a sport where communication happened through physical contact rather than verbal instruction, where success was measured by technique and determination rather than social skills. Maya had fallen in love with wrestling immediately. On the mat, her deafness wasn't a disability, it was an advantage. She couldn't be distracted by crowd noise or trash talk from opponents. She had developed an extraordinary sense of balance and spatial awareness that made her nearly impossible to surprise or catch off guard. Over the past 9 years, Maya had won state championships in California, competed at national tournaments, and earned a full scholarship to wrestle at Colorado State University. Her coaches had called her technique flawless and her competitive instincts unparalleled, but she had promised her parents she would avoid physical confrontations at her new school. Wrestling was for the mat, they had agreed, not for solving social problems. As Ashley's hand remained raised threateningly above Maya's trapped hands, Maya made a split-second decision that would change everything at Cedar Ridge High School. I'm warning you, Maya said quietly, her voice carrying a new tone that none of the 3 girls recognized. Let go of my hands. Ashley's response was swift and vicious. Her palm came down hard against the back of Maya's left hand, with a sharp crack that echoed across the nearby tables. The slap stung. But more than the physical pain, Maya felt something break inside her, not her spirit, but her restraint. Ashley raised her hand to strike again, and in that moment, Maya made a choice that would reveal exactly who she really was beneath the quiet exterior. The gymnasium was about to learn what happened when you cornered a state champion wrestler who had and pushed too far. Maya's transformation from victim to force of nature happened in the space of a heartbeat. The sharp crack of Ashley's palm against her hand had awakened something primal within her, not anger, but the cold, calculating mindset that had made her a champion on wrestling mats across California. In one fluid motion, Maya twisted her trapped left hand using a technique called an inside wrist control that she had perfected through thousands of repetitions. The movement was so quick and precise that Emma's grip simply dissolved, leaving the brunette staring at her empty hand in confusion. Before Jessica could react to what had happened on the other side, Maya's right hand executed a similar escape. But this time she maintained contact with Jessica's wrist. With a grip that had been conditioned by years of grappling, Maya applied pressure to a specific point that made Jessica's hand go numb and forced her to release her hold immediately. Ashley, who had been preparing to deliver another slap, found herself facing a completely different person than the quiet girl who had been sitting passively moments before. Maya stood slowly, her posture shifting from defensive to something that veteran wrestlers would recognize as the stance of a predator sizing up prey. "You wanted to test me," Maya said, her voice steady and carrying an authority that silenced the whispered conversations at nearby tables. "But you tested the wrong thing." Emma rubbed her wrist, trying to restore feeling to her fingers. "What did you just do to me?" Maya's eyes never left Ashley's face as she responded. "Pressure point manipulation. It's basic anatomy combined with leverage principles. I can show you more if you'd like." Jessica had taken a step backward, suddenly aware that the dynamic of their encounter had shifted dramatically. "Look, we were just joking around. You don't need to get all weird about it." "Weird?" Maya repeated, tilting her head slightly. "You held down my hand so your friend could hit me, and I'm the one being weird?" Ashley, who prided herself on never backing down from confrontation, felt an unfamiliar sensation creeping up her spine. Something about Maya's calm confidence was more unsettling than if she had screamed or cried. "You think you're tough now? Just because you did some martial arts trick?" "Not martial arts," Maya corrected, taking a single step forward that somehow seemed to claim the entire space around their table. "Wrestling. And those weren't tricks. They were basic defensive maneuvers that any freshman on the wrestling team would know." The mention of wrestling caused a ripple of interest among the students who had been pretending not to watch. Cedar Ridge High had a strong wrestling program, and several members of the team were scattered throughout the cafeteria. Maya could see recognition dawning on a few faces, students who understood that wrestling wasn't just a sport but a comprehensive system of physical control. Emma tried to reassert some authority in the situation. "So what, you think you can fight all three of us?" Maya's expression didn't change, but there was something in her eyes that made Emma unconsciously take a half step backward. "Fighting implies that both sides have a chance to win." The statement hung in the air like a challenge, and Ashley felt compelled to respond. She had built her reputation on being the girl who didn't back down, who could intimidate anyone through sheer force of personality. The idea that a deaf transfer student might make her look weak in front of the entire cafeteria was unacceptable. "You know what?" Ashley said, her voice rising to ensure nearby tables could hear. "I think our new friend needs to learn how things work at Cedar Ridge. Maybe if she spent less time waving her hands around and more time learning to fit in, she wouldn't have these problems." Maya studied Ashley's face with the same intensity she had once reserved for opponents across the wrestling mat. She could read the insecurity beneath the bravado, the desperation to maintain social status at any cost. It was a weakness she could exploit, but something held her back. Her parents had worked too hard to give her opportunities for her. To throw them away on someone like Ashley Winters. Her wrestling scholarship to Colorado State represented years of sacrifice, early morning practices, weekend tournaments, her mother driving hundreds of miles to competitions while her father worked extra shifts to pay for equipment and travel expenses. "You're right," Maya said finally, surprising everyone within earshot. "I do need to learn how things work here." Ashley smiled triumphantly, interpreting Maya's words as surrender. "See? That wasn't so hard. Maybe we can even be friends if you—" "I need to learn," Maya continued, cutting off Ashley's patronizing tone. "How to identify which students are worth my time and which ones are just noise." The dismissal was delivered with such quiet certainty that it stung worse than any insult Ashley had ever received. The implication that she, Ashley Winters, queen of the junior class, was beneath notice from a deaf transfer student was almost incomprehensible. "Excuse me?" Ashley's voice carried a dangerous edge that made several nearby students look up from their conversations. Maya began gathering her lunch items with deliberate care, making it clear that she considered the conversation finished. "You heard me correctly the first time. Nobody talks to me like that," Ashley said, her voice rising to a level that was drawing attention from across the cafeteria. "Especially not some freak who can't even hear herself talk." The slur hit its mark, and Maya's hand stilled over her lunch bag. When she looked up, Ashley saw something in the deaf girl's expression that made her stomach tighten with unexpected apprehension. "I can't hear myself talk," Maya agreed, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper, which somehow made it more intimidating than if she had shouted. "But I can see everything you're doing. Every micro-expression, every tell, every sign that you're scared and trying to cover it up with aggression." Ashley felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I'm not scared of you." Your pupils dilated when I stood up. Your breathing became shallow when I mentioned wrestling. You've taken 3 small steps backwards since this conversation started, and your hands are trembling. Maya's voice remained calm and observational, as if she were conducting a science experiment. "Those are all physiological indicators of fear." Emma and Jessica exchanged uncertain glances. They had never seen Ashley rattled like this, had never encountered anyone who could read people with such unsettling accuracy. Maya finished packing her lunch and slung her messenger bag over her shoulder. As she prepared to leave, Ashley made a decision that would prove to be a catastrophic miscalculation. "You think you're so smart," Ashley said, moving to block Maya's path to the cafeteria exit. "Let's see how smart you are when you're lying." On the floor, Maya stopped walking and regarded Ashley with the patience of someone who had dealt with far more dangerous opponents than a high school bully. "Move. Make me." The 2 words hung between them like a gauntlet thrown down in a medieval courtyard. Students at nearby tables had stopped even pretending to eat, sensing that something significant was about to unfold. A few had pulled out their phones, though whether to call for help or record what happened next was unclear. Maya set her bag down carefully and turned to face Ashley fully. "You have no idea what you're asking for. I'm asking for you to show me what you've got," Ashley replied, raising her hands in what she probably thought was a fighting stance, but which looked more like a child's imitation of what they'd seen in movies. Maya's expression didn't change, but something subtle shifted in her posture. It was barely perceptible, a slight bend in her knees, a lowering of her center of gravity, a positioning of her feet that created a stable base. To most observers, she looked the same as before, but to anyone with wrestling experience, she had just transformed from a regular teenager into a competitor ready for action. "Last chance," Maya said quietly. "Walk away." Ashley's response was to swing her right fist in a wild haymaker aimed at Maya's face. It was the kind of punch that might work in a catfight, between untrained teenagers, telegraphed and lacking any real technique or power. Maya didn't even need to use advanced wrestling moves to deal with such an amateur attack. She simply stepped to her left while raising her right hand to redirect Ashley's arm. The combination of Maya's movement and Ashley's own momentum sent the blonde girl stumbling forward, off balance and vulnerable. Before Ashley could recover, Maya had stepped behind her and applied what wrestlers call an arm drag technique that used an opponent's forward momentum against them. Maya's left hand controlled Ashley's wrist while her right hand pushed against Ashley's elbow, spinning the taller girl around and leaving her facing away from Maya in a position of complete disadvantage. The entire sequence took less than 2 seconds. Ashley found herself staring at the cafeteria wall, Maya somewhere behind her, completely disoriented by how quickly the situation had reversed. She tried to turn around, but Maya maintained control of her arm, keeping Ashley facing away and unable to mount any kind of counterattack. "This is called control," Maya said calmly, her voice carrying clearly through the now silent cafeteria. "In wrestling, position is everything. Right now, I can put you on the ground anytime I choose, or I can let you go and pretend this never happened." Ashley struggled against Maya's grip, but every movement she made only seemed to put her in a worse position. Maya's control was absolute, not brutal or painful, but inescapable in the way that only comes from years of technical refinement. Emma started forward to help her friend, but Maya's voice stopped her cold. "I wouldn't recommend that. I can control 2 people as easily as 1, and I promise you don't want to be on the receiving end of what I do to people who jump into fights that aren't theirs." The quiet certainty in Maya's voice convinced Emma to stay where she was. There was something about the deaf girl's demeanor that suggested she wasn't bluffing or trying to sound tough. She was simply stating facts about what would happen if the situation escalated further. Jessica, meanwhile, had gone pale as she realized that their easy target had turned into something entirely different. "Ashley, maybe we should just—" "Shut up," Ashley hissed, still struggling futilely against Maya's control. "I'm not giving up to some deaf freak." Maya's grip tightened slightly, not enough to cause pain, but enough to demonstrate that she had been holding back. "I gave you multiple chances to walk away with your dignity intact. You chose escalation every time. Let go of me," Ashley demanded, her voice carrying a note of desperation that several students recognized as the sound of someone who had finally encountered a problem they couldn't bully their way through. Maya considered the request for a moment, then made a decision that surprised everyone watching. She released Ashley's arm and stepped back, giving the blonde girl space to turn around and face her. Ashley spun around immediately, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. The entire cafeteria was watching now, and she could feel her carefully constructed social status crumbling with every second that passed. "This isn't over," Ashley said, trying to inject menace into her voice despite the obvious tremor of uncertainty. Maya picked up her messenger bag and slung it over her shoulder once again. "Yes, it is. What makes you so sure?" Maya looked around the cafeteria, noting the dozens of faces turned in their direction, the phones that had appeared to record what came next, the mixture of shock and anticipation in the air. "Because," Maya said simply, "everyone here just saw you throw the first punch at a deaf girl half your size, and everyone here just saw what happened next." The truth of the statement settled over Ashley like a cold blanket. High school social dynamics were unforgiving, and being publicly humiliated by someone you had tried to bully was the kind of thing that could permanently damage your reputation. Maya began walking toward the cafeteria exit, but paused after a few steps and turned back to address Ashley one final time. "For what it's worth," Maya said, her voice carrying just enough sympathy to be more devastating than any insult. "You're not as tough as you think you are, but you're not as weak as you're afraid you might be either. You just picked the wrong person to test yourself against." As Maya disappeared through the cafeteria doors, She left behind a room full of stunned teenagers and 3 former bullies, who were beginning to understand that they had seriously underestimated the quiet girl with the worn messenger bag. But Maya's demonstration of control and restraint in the cafeteria was just the beginning. The real test of her abilities and her character was still to come. The afternoon following the cafeteria incident brought an unexpected shift in Cedar Ridge High's social ecosystem. Maya walked through hallways that felt different. Conversations paused as she passed. Eyes followed her movement with a mixture of curiosity and newfound respect, and the subtle bubble of isolation that had surrounded her since arriving began to show cracks. Word of Ashley Winters getting outmaneuvered by the new deaf girl had spread with the velocity that only high school gossip could achieve. By the time Maya reached her AP chemistry class, she found herself the subject of whispered conversations and sideways glances that carried an entirely different energy than before. Coach Patricia Daniels, who taught chemistry when she wasn't training Cedar Ridge's wrestling team, noticed Maya the moment she walked into the classroom. The 40-something woman had heard about the cafeteria confrontation from 3 different sources during her lunch break, each version more dramatic than the last. What caught Coach Daniels' attention wasn't the gossip itself. High school drama was as predictable as seasonal changes, but the consistent details across all versions. Multiple witnesses described Maya's movement as controlled, technical, and executed with the kind of precision that suggested serious training. As Maya took her seat near the front of the classroom, Coach Daniels made a mental note to investigate further. Cedar Ridge's wrestling program was always looking for talent, and if even half of what she'd heard was accurate, Maya's shun might be exactly what their women's team needed. Chemistry class proceeded normally until the moment Ashley Winters entered 5 minutes late, her usual confident stride replaced by something more cautious. Maya sensed the tension immediately, not through hearing Ashley's entrance, but through the shift in body language from her classmates and the subtle change in lighting as someone blocked the doorway. Ashley's eyes found Maya immediately, and the brief contact between them carried the weight of their unfinished business. The blonde girl's face showed traces of the humiliation she'd endured, but underneath Maya could read something more dangerous: determination mixed with wounded pride. Coach Daniels observed the interaction with the trained eye of someone who had managed teenage athletes for 15 years. She recognized the signs of escalating conflict and made another mental note to keep an eye on both girls. The class focused on molecular structures and chemical bonding, topics that Maya found herself drawn to despite the undercurrent of tension. Chemistry had always appealed to her because it dealt with predictable reactions, elements combined according to specific rules, and if you understood the principles, you could anticipate the outcomes. Human behavior, unfortunately, was far less predictable. After class, as students filtered out into the hallway, Coach Daniels approached Maya's desk. The teacher had learned basic sign language years earlier when working with a deaf wrestler at her previous school, and her singing was more fluent than Mrs. Rodriguez's earlier attempts. "Maya," Coach Daniels signed while speaking aloud, "I'd like to talk with you for a moment." Maya looked up, surprised to encounter someone who could communicate in her primary language with actual competence. "Of course, Coach Daniels. You know who I am. Your reputation precedes you. 3 state championships in the last 5 years, and your wrestlers consistently earn college scholarships." Maya's signing was fluid and precise, reflecting years of practice. "You're also the only teacher in this school who's bothered to learn ASL properly." Coach Daniels smiled. "I heard about what happened at lunch today." Maya's expression became guarded. "I'm sure you heard several different versions." "Actually, that's what interests me. Usually when these stories get passed around, the details change dramatically. But everyone who saw what happened described the same thin, controlled movement, technical precision, and complete situational awareness." Coach Daniels leaned against her desk. "That's not typical teenage fighting. That's training." Maya considered her response carefully. I've had some experience with wrestling. Some experience? Coach Daniels raised an eyebrow. Maya, I've been coaching for 15 years. I know the difference between someone who took a few self-defense classes and someone who spent serious time on a mat. There was no judgment in Coach Daniels' voice, only curiosity and what might have been professional interest. Maya found herself wanting to trust this woman who had made the effort to communicate in her language, and who seemed to understand the difference between violence and sport. I wrestled competitively in California, Maya admitted. I started when I was 8 and competed through last year. What level? State championships, some national tournaments. Maya's signing became more animated as she warmed to the subject. I have a full ride to Colorado State starting next fall. Coach Daniels whistled low. Colorado State has one of the best women's wrestling programs in the country. They don't give full rides to just anyone. Coach Martinez there saw me compete at nationals last year. Said I had college-level technique already. What weight class? I competed at 112 pounds, but I'm probably closer to 118 now. Still growing into my frame. Coach Daniels studied Maya with new appreciation. You know, our women's wrestling team could use someone with your experience. We have talented girls, but most of them started in high school. Someone with your background could help elevate the entire program. Maya shook her head. I appreciate the offer, but I promised my parents I wouldn't wrestle this year. They want me to focus on academics and avoiding ... complications. Like, what happened at lunch today? Exactly like what happened at lunch today. Coach Daniels nodded thoughtfully. I understand their concerns. But Maya, you can't avoid who you are. And from what I hear, you showed remarkable restraint today. A lesser person might have seriously hurt someone. Before Maya could respond, the conversation was interrupted by the arrival of 3 students. At the classroom door, Ashley, Emma, and Jessica stood in the doorway, clearly having waited for the right moment to approach. Coach Daniels straightened, her demeanor shifting to the authoritative presence that had kept countless teenagers in line over the years. Can I help you, ladies? Ashley stepped forward, her face composed but her eyes burning with suppressed anger. We need to talk to Maya about what happened earlier. I see. And what exactly do you need to discuss? Emma chimed in from behind Ashley. There was a misunderstanding at lunch. We just want to clear the air. Maya stood slowly, gathering her books while keeping her eyes on the 3 girls. Even without being able to hear their voices, she could read the tension in their postures, the barely controlled aggression in their movements. Coach Daniels positioned herself between Maya and the doorway. Perhaps this conversation would be better held in the guidance counselor's office, with proper supervision. That won't be necessary, Ashley said, her voice carrying false sweetness. We're just going to have a friendly chat. Maya stepped forward, bringing herself within Coach Daniels' protective radius, but making it clear she wouldn't hide behind the teacher. What did you want to discuss, Ashley? I wanted to apologize, Ashley said, the words sounding like they caused physical pain. What happened at lunch got out of hand, and I shouldn't have ... escalated things. Maya studied Ashley's face, reading the micro-expressions that revealed the insincerity behind the words. This wasn't an apology, it was strategy. I accept your apology, Maya replied carefully. I hope we can move forward without any further incidents. Absolutely, Ashley agreed, but there was something in her smile that made Coach Daniels frown. In fact, I was thinking we should get to know each other better. Maybe you'd like to come watch our field hockey practice today? We could show you around the athletic facilities. Coach Daniels' protective instincts activated immediately. Maya, you don't have to. I'd be happy to see the facilities. Maya interrupted, making a decision that surprised everyone present. What time should I meet you? Ashley's smile widened, but there was no warmth in it. How about right after school? We'll meet you at the gymnasium entrance. Perfect. As the three girls left, Coach Daniels turned to Maya with concern. Are you sure that's wise? Something about this feels like a setup. Maya's expression was calm, but there was steel underneath. It definitely is a setup. But they don't realize they're walking into one too. What do you mean? Coach, I've been competing against people who want to hurt me for 9 years. Ashley Winters and her friends are amateurs compared to some of the opponents I've faced. Maya shouldered her bag. Besides, I'm curious to see what they think they can accomplish. Maya, if they're planning something physical, then they'll learn the same lesson Ashley learned at lunch. Except this time there won't be a crowd to worry about. Maya's signing became sharper, more decisive. I tried to de-escalate. I tried to walk away. I even accepted her fake apology. But if they insist on pushing this further, they're going to discover exactly what a Colorado State scholarship winner can do when she stops holding back. Coach Daniels watched Maya leave with mixed feelings. The educator in her wanted to intervene, to prevent what seemed like an inevitable confrontation. But the coach in her recognized something that commanded respect. Maya wasn't looking for trouble, but she wasn't going to run from it either. Meanwhile, Ashley, Emma, and Jessica were gathered in the girls' bathroom, finalizing their plan for the afternoon. Are you sure about this? Jessica asked nervously. What if she really is as good as everyone says? Ashley checked her reflection in the mirror, adjusting her hair with sharp, angry movements. She got lucky in the cafeteria. Caught me off guard. But 3 against 1 in the gym? No way she can handle all of us. What if someone sees us? Emma worried. The gym is empty after school, except for custodial staff, and they're always in the lower level. Besides, we're not going to hurt her badly, just rough her up enough to put her back in her place. Emma nodded, but Jessica still looked uncertain. What if she fights back like she did at lunch? Ashley's reflection smiled coldly. Then we'll make sure she can't. What none of them realized was that Maya had spent the last hour of classes thinking through every possible scenario for their afternoon encounter. She had analyzed their body language, their group dynamics, and their likely tactical approaches. More importantly, she had made a decision that would change everything at Cedar Ridge High School. She was in holding back. As the final bell rang and students began streaming toward the exits, Maya made her way to the gymnasium with the focused calm of someone who had been preparing for competition her entire life. The empty gym awaited, its polished floors and high ceilings about to witness something that would become Cedar Ridge legend for years to come. Ashley and her friends thought they were setting a trap. They had no idea. They were walking into an arena where Maya Chun had never lost a match. The Cedar Ridge High Gymnasium stood empty in the late afternoon light, its polished hardwood floors reflecting the fluorescent lighting that hummed overhead. Banks of bleachers rose on either side like silent witnesses, while championship banners hung from the rafters, commemorating decades of athletic achievement. Maya arrived first, pushing through the heavy double doors with the measured stride of someone who had entered countless gymnasiums before competitions. The familiar smell of rubber mats, cleaning supplies, and the lingering scent of athletic effort filled her nostrils. This was her natural habitat, a place where physical ability mattered more than social hierarchies, where technique trumped popularity. She walked to the center of the gym and turned slowly, taking in the layout with tactical precision. Multiple exit points, open floor space, excellent lighting, and most importantly, no obstacles that could be used as weapons or create dangerous falls. If Ashley and her friends intended to escalate beyond verbal confrontation, this was actually an ideal venue for Maya to demonstrate exactly what 9 years of competitive wrestling could accomplish. Maya set her messenger bag against the wall and began a series of subtle stretches, movements that looked casual to an untrained observer, but which were specifically designed to activate the muscle groups and neural pathways that wrestling required. Her body responded with the automatic efficiency of thousands of hours of conditioning. As she moved through her warm-up routine, Maya reflected on the path that had brought her to this moment. Her parents had enrolled her in wrestling, initially as therapy, a way to build confidence and physical strength after a particularly difficult period in elementary school, where her deafness had made her a target for cruel children. Her first coach, Miguel Santos, had been a former Olympic team member who understood that wrestling was about more than winning matches. He had taught her that the sport was a conversation conducted through physical contact, where technique and mental toughness mattered more than size or strength. Wrestling, Coach Santos had told her during one of their early sessions, is the most honest sport in the world. On the mat, you can't lie about who you are. Every weakness gets exposed, but more importantly, every strength gets amplified. Maya had taken those words to heart, approaching her training with the methodical intensity that characterized everything she did. While other kids her age were focused on social media and teenage drama, Maya was studying video footage of international competitions, analyzing technique, and pushing her body to its physical limits. The dedication had paid off in ways that went far beyond trophies and scholarships. Wrestling had given her unshakable confidence in her own abilities, the kind of self-assurance that couldn't be undermined by bullies or social rejection. It had taught her to read opponents with deadly accuracy, to remain calm under pressure, and to turn adversity into advantage. The gymnasium doors opened with a metallic clang that Maya felt more than heard through the vibrations in the floor. Ashley, Emma, and Jessica entered together, their formation deliberately intimidating. Ashley in the center with her lieutenants flanking her like bodyguards. Maya turned to face them, noting immediately that all three girls had changed clothes since their encounter after chemistry class. Gone were the designer jeans and carefully coordinated outfits, replaced by athletic wear that suggested they had come prepared for physical confrontation. Ashley wore black leggings and a fitted tank top that showed off her field hockey conditioning. Emma had chosen similar attire, while Jessica sported shorts and a t-shirt that revealed arms strengthened by years of volleyball. They had clearly made strategic wardrobe choices, prioritizing movement over fashion. "Thanks for coming, Maya," Ashley called out as the three girls approached across the polished floor. "We thought it would be nice to have some privacy for our conversation." Maya remained in the center of the gym, letting them come to her rather than moving to meet them. It was a subtle psychological advantage controlling the space, while forcing them to enter her territory. "What did you want to discuss?" Maya asked, her voice carrying clearly in the acoustic environment of the gymnasium. Ashley stopped approximately 10 feet away, with Emma and Jessica spreading out to create a rough triangle formation around Maya. It was clearly a practiced maneuver, probably developed through years of intimidating smaller students. "I've been thinking about what happened at lunch," Ashley began, her tone conversational but her posture aggressive. "And I realized that maybe I was too hasty in apologizing." Maya's expression didn't change, but internally she began categorizing threats and calculating responses. Ashley was the primary aggressor and most dangerous due to her size and apparent athleticism. Emma was tall and quick, but likely relied more on intimidation than actual fighting ability. Jessica was stocky and strong but seemed the most hesitant. "Of the three." "I see," Maya replied neutrally. "And what conclusion did you reach?" "I think you embarrassed me in front of the entire school," Ashley continued, taking a step closer. "And I think you did it on purpose, using some cheap tricks you learned in whatever martial arts class your parents signed you up for." Maya almost smiled at the fundamental misunderstanding. "Not martial arts. Wrestling, whatever. The point is, you made me look weak in front of people whose opinions matter to me." Ashley's voice was rising, the careful composure she'd maintained all day finally cracking. "Do you have any idea what that's like? To have your reputation destroyed by some freak who can't even hear herself talk." The slur hit its intended target, but instead of provoking anger, It clarified Maya's thinking. These girls hadn't learned anything from the cafeteria incident. They were still operating under the assumption that verbal cruelty and physical intimidation could break her spirit. Your reputation was destroyed by your own choices, Maya said calmly. I gave you multiple opportunities to walk away with dignity intact. Emma stepped closer from Maya's left side. Maybe it's time someone taught you some respect. Maya turned her head to track Emma's movement while keeping Ashley in her peripheral vision. Years of wrestling had trained her to maintain awareness of multiple opponents simultaneously, a skill that was about to prove invaluable. Respect is earned through actions, not demanded through threats, Maya replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline beginning to flood her system. Jessica moved to complete the encirclement, positioning herself behind Maya's right shoulder. You think you're so smart, don't you? Little Miss Perfect with her fancy wrestling moves. Maya rotated slightly, maintaining visual contact with all three girls while keeping her back to the wall of bleachers. It was a defensive position that eliminated the possibility of attacks from behind while maintaining multiple escape routes. I think I'm prepared, Maya said simply. Ashley's patience finally snapped. Prepared for what? You're outnumbered 3-1 in an empty gym where no one can hear you scream. Though I guess that last part doesn't matter much to you, does it? The cruelty of the comment regarding Maya's deafness crossed a line that even Emma and Jessica seemed to recognize. Maya saw Jessica flinch slightly at Ashley's words, suggesting that perhaps not all three girls were equally committed to this confrontation. Maya's response surprised all of them. She laughed not with humor, but with genuine amusement at their tactical ignorance. You think being outnumbered is a disadvantage for me? Maya asked, her smile carrying no warmth whatsoever. In wrestling, we call what you're doing giving up position advantage. You've surrounded me, which means you can't coordinate attacks without risking hitting each other. You've eliminated your own mobility while giving me multiple targets in close proximity. Ashley's confidence wavered slightly. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that you three have never been in a real fight in your lives, while I've been competing against people who actually know what they're doing since I was 8 years old. Maya's posture shifted subtly, her center of gravity lowering as she prepared for action. I'm talking about the fact that you're standing in my territory now, a gymnasium where physical ability matters more than social status. Emma glanced nervously at Ashley. Maybe we should just shut up, Ashley snapped, her eyes never leaving Maya's face. We came here to finish this, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Maya nodded slowly, as if Ashley had just confirmed something she'd been waiting to hear. In that case, I need you to understand something very clearly. What happened in the cafeteria was me showing restraint. I was trying to resolve the situation without anyone getting hurt. She paused, letting the words sink in. But you've made it clear that restraint is interpreted as weakness. You've escalated to isolation and numerical superiority. You've crossed lines that I warned you not to cross. Maya's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath that made all three girls unconsciously take half steps backward. So here's what's going to happen, Maya continued, her gaze moving from face to face. You're going to attack me, because that's why you brought me here. And when you do, I'm going to defend myself using the skills I've spent 9 years perfecting. But unlike in the cafeteria, I'm not going to hold back to protect your feelings or your dignity. Ashley felt something cold settle in her stomach. The quiet girl they had cornered no longer seemed like prey. She seemed like a predator who had been patiently waiting for the right moment to reveal her true nature. You're bluffing, Ashley said, but her voice lacked conviction. Test that theory, Maya replied simply. The challenge hung in the air between them like a live wire. Ashley realized that she had maneuvered herself into a position where backing down would be just as damaging to her reputation as whatever might happen if they followed through with their plan. Emma and Jessica looked to their leader for guidance, uncertainty evident in their expressions. They had expected the deaf girl to be intimidated by their numbers and isolation. Instead, she seemed almost eager for whatever was about to unfold. Ashley made the decision that would define the next 60 seconds of their lives. "Take her down," she ordered, lunging forward with her hands outstretched toward Maya's shoulders. What happened next would become the stuff of Cedar Ridge High legend, talked about in hushed tones for years to come. Maya Shun, the quiet transfer student who couldn't hear the sound of her own voice, was about to demonstrate exactly what happened when you cornered a state champion wrestler who had finally decided to stop holding back. The gymnasium was about to witness something that would change everything at Cedar Ridge High School forever. The moment Ashley lunged forward, time seemed to dilate in the way it always did for Maya during competition. 9 years of training had conditioned her nervous system to process information at accelerated speeds when under pressure, turning chaotic situations into slow-motion sequences where every movement could be analyzed and countered. Ashley's attack was everything Maya had expected, aggressive but sloppy, powered by anger rather than technique. The blonde girl's hands reached for Maya's shoulders in what was probably intended as a tackle, but her footwork was wrong, her balance compromised by emotion, and her approach telegraphed from 3 steps away. Maya's response was a textbook demonstration of what separated trained fighters from angry teenagers. Instead of meeting Ashley's charge head-on, she stepped laterally to her right while simultaneously grabbing Ashley's extended left wrist with both hands. The movement was called an outside step, and it transformed Ashley's forward momentum into a weapon against herself. Using Ashley's own speed and aggression, Maya executed a perfect arm drag, pulling the taller girl past her while maintaining control of her wrist. Ashley found herself stumbling forward, off balance and vulnerable, with Maya now positioned on her back and to her side. Before Ashley could recover or even understand what had happened, Maya had transitioned into a move that would have impressed college-level competitors. She released Ashley's wrist and immediately wrapped her right arm around Ashley's waist, while her left hand controlled Ashley's far shoulder. It was the setup for a technique called a lateral drop. Maya drove forward with her legs while simultaneously lifting and rotating Ashley's body. The combination of leverage, timing, and explosive power sent Ashley flying through the air in a graceful arc that ended with her crashing onto the gymnasium floor with an impact that echoed off the walls like a gunshot. The entire sequence, from Ashley's initial lunge to her impact with the floor, had taken less than 3 seconds. Emma, who had been moving to attack Maya from the left, froze in shock as she watched her friend hit the ground with enough force to knock the wind from her lungs. Ashley lay on her back, gasping and staring at the ceiling lights, clearly stunned by the speed and violence of her takedown. Maya had already returned to her feet and was turning to address the remaining threats. Her breathing was controlled, her stance balanced, and her expression focused but not angry. She looked like exactly what she was, an elite athlete operating in her natural environment. Ashley learned what happens when you attack someone with superior training, Maya said calmly, her voice carrying clearly through the suddenly silent gymnasium. Would you like the same lesson, or would you prefer to help your friend up and leave? Emma's confidence had evaporated the moment she saw Ashley hit the floor. The takedown had been so quick and decisive that it shattered any illusions about Maya being an easy target. But Emma was also trapped by the logic of teenage social dynamics. Running away now would be almost as humiliating as getting thrown around like Ashley. Jessica, meanwhile, had moved closer during the initial confrontation and now found herself within Maya's striking range. Unlike Emma, Jessica seemed frozen by indecision rather than fear, her volleyball-trained reflexes warring with her growing understanding that this situation was far beyond her capabilities. Maya read their hesitation and made a calculated decision. Rather than waiting for them to overcome their shock and coordinate an attack, she took the initiative. She moved toward Jessica first, closing the distance with the smooth, efficient footwork that had made her nearly unbeatable in her weight. "Class." Jessica raised her hands defensively, but she might as well have been moving underwater compared to Maya's explosive speed. Maya feinted left, drawing Jessica's guard in that direction, then immediately changed levels and shot for a double leg. Takedown. Her shoulder drove into Jessica's midsection, while her arms wrapped around both of Jessica's legs just below the knees. The impact lifted Jessica completely off the ground. What followed was a textbook demonstration of wrestling technique, meeting real-world applications. Maya drove upward with her legs while pulling Jessica's feet toward her chest, completely destroying Jessica's balance and base of support. Jessica found herself horizontal in the air, looking down at the gymnasium floor that was rapidly approaching. Her face. Maya controlled the takedown perfectly, ensuring that Jessica landed safely on her back rather than dangerously on her head or neck. But safely was a relative term. Jessica hit the floor with enough impact to drive the air from her lungs and send shockwaves through her body. As Jessica lay gasping beside Ashley, Emma realized that she was now facing Maya one-on-one, with two graphic examples of what happened to people who underestimated the quiet deaf girl. "Your turn," Maya said simply, turning to face Emma with the patient expression of someone who was thoroughly enjoying the opportunity to demonstrate her skills. Emma's athletic background in basketball had given her reasonable reflexes and good spatial awareness, but it had also taught her to recognize when she was completely outmatched. Watching Maya dismantle her two friends with surgical precision had made it clear that this wasn't a fight. It was a lesson in the difference between athletic ability and combat training. "I don't want to fight you," Emma said, taking a step backward. "Smart choice," Maya replied. "But unfortunately, you've already made your decision by coming here and participating in this ambush." Emma looked desperately toward the gymnasium doors, calculating whether she could reach them before Maya could catch her. The distance seemed impossibly far, and she had just witnessed Maya's explosive speed firsthand. "Please," Emma said, her voice carrying genuine fear for the first time. "We made a mistake. We're sorry." Maya studied Emma's face with the same analytical precision she had once reserved for opponents during pre-match interviews. She could see genuine remorse there, mixed with terror, but she could also see the calculation, the hope that an apology might buy mercy. "You're sorry because you're scared," Maya observed. "But 5 minutes ago, you were perfectly willing to participate in a 3-on-1 assault against someone half your size." Emma's expression crumbled as she realized that Maya wasn't interested in her fear-driven apology. The deaf girl was operating according to a different set of rules, where actions had consequences and intimidation tactics carried real costs. Maya began moving toward Emma with the deliberate pace of a predator who knew its prey had nowhere to run. Each step was measured and balanced, ready to explode into action the moment Emma tried to flee or fight. But before Maya could close the distance, Ashley's voice cut through the tension from her position on the floor. "Stop," Ashley gasped, struggling to sit up despite the pain radiating through her back and shoulders. "Just stop." Maya paused, turning her attention to the girl who had initiated this entire confrontation. Ashley was clearly hurt, but not seriously injured, exactly as Maya had intended. The takedown had been designed to shock and disorient rather than cause lasting damage. "You have something to say?" Maya asked. Ashley looked around the gymnasium, at Jessica lying motionless beside her, at Emma trembling near the wall, at Maya standing over them all like an avenging angel. The complete reversal of power dynamics was so total that it took Ashley a moment to process what had actually happened. "You could have really hurt us," Ashley said quietly, her voice lacking all traces of its former arrogance. "Yes," Maya agreed simply. "I could have, but you didn't." "No, I didn't." Ashley struggled to her feet, moving carefully and keeping her distance from Maya. "Why?" Maya considered the question seriously before answering. Because breaking people isn't the point. The point is stopping them from trying to break others. Jessica had recovered enough to sit up, her face pale and her breathing still labored. How did you do that? How did you move so fast? 9 years of training, 6 hours a day, 365 days a year, Maya replied matter-of-factly. While you were learning to intimidate people weaker than you, I was learning to defeat people stronger than me. Emma finally found her voice. We didn't know. We thought you were just different. I am different, Maya said. I'm deaf. But I also have a lot of other things that you never bothered to discover because you were too busy deciding I was an easy target. Ashley wiped blood from a small cut on her lip, a souvenir from her impact with the gymnasium floor. So what happens now? Maya looked at each of the 3 girls in turn, reading their body language and facial expressions with the same precision. She had once used to anticipate opponents' moves on wrestling mats. Now you have a choice, she said finally. You can continue trying to make my life difficult, in which case you'll discover that today was me being gentle. Or you can accept that your approach to social dynamics doesn't work on everyone, and find better ways to spend your time. What if we tell people what happened here? Emma asked. Though her voice suggested she already knew the answer, Maya smiled for the first time since entering the gymnasium, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Tell them what exactly? That 3 of you cornered one deaf girl in an empty gym and she defended herself. That the girl you've been bullying for weeks turned out to be a state champion wrestler. That you got outfought by someone you thought was defenseless? Ashley flinched at the accuracy of Maya's assessment. Any version of this story that became public would be devastating to their reputations and social standing. But more importantly, Maya continued, you'll be admitting to conspiracy and assault. I'm pretty sure your parents and the school administration would be very interested in that conversation. Jessica finally stood up, moving gingerly and avoiding eye contact with Maya. We won't tell anyone. Smart choice, Maya agreed. But understand something clearly, this ends here. No more harassment, no more accidents in the hallway, no more testing to see if I'm really deaf. You leave me alone, and I'll extend you the same courtesy. Ashley nodded slowly, her earlier bravado completely extinguished. And if we don't? Maya's expression became utterly serious. Then next time, I won't be concerned about your well-being. Next time, I'll treat you like opponents instead of misguided teenagers. And trust me when I tell you that you really don't want to find out what that looks like. The 3 girls gathered their belongings and began moving toward the gymnasium doors, their earlier confidence replaced by cautious defeat. As they reached the exit, Ashley turned back one final time. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I really didn't know you could do that. Maya nodded acknowledgement. Now you do. As the heavy doors swung shut behind them, Maya was left alone in the gymnasium where she had just redefined the social dynamics of Cedar Ridge High School. The silence was profound and peaceful, broken only by the distant humming of fluorescent lights and the settling sounds of the building around her. She walked to where she had left her messenger bag and began gathering her belongings, moving with the calm efficiency of someone who had just completed a task that needed doing. There was no celebration in her demeanor, no sense of triumph or vindication. Maya had simply done what was necessary to protect herself and establish boundaries that needed to be respected. The confrontation had been inevitable from the moment. Ashley decided that Maya's differences made her an acceptable target. As she prepared to leave the gymnasium, Maya reflected on the lessons that had been learned by everyone involved. Ashley, Emma, and Jessica had discovered that assumptions about weakness could be dangerously wrong. Maya had learned that sometimes the only way to achieve peace was through a demonstration of strength, but the most important lesson was yet to come. As word of what had happened in the gymnasium began to spread through Cedar Ridge High School's complex social ecosystem, the transformation at Cedar Ridge High School began subtly. like ripples spreading across a still pond after a stone breaks the surface. By Tuesday morning, less than 18 hours after the gymnasium incident, the entire social ecosystem of the school had begun shifting in ways that no one could have predicted. Maya arrived at school to find something she had never experienced before: genuine respect from her peers. Students who had previously looked through her now offered cautious nods of acknowledgement. Conversations paused not out of curiosity about her deafness, but out of recognition that she commanded a different kind of attention now. The change was most evident in her first period English class, where Mrs. Rodriguez noticed that students were actually listening when Maya participated in discussions. Her insights about literary themes were being considered thoughtfully rather than dismissed or ignored. "Maya, that's an excellent observation about the protagonist's internal conflict," Mrs. Rodriguez said after Maya had analyzed a particularly complex passage from their current novel. "Can you elaborate on how that connects to the broader themes we've been discussing?" Maya's response was articulate and well-reasoned, demonstrating the intellectual depth that had always been there but was finally being recognized. As she signed while speaking, several students watched with genuine interest rather than the mocking attention she had grown accustomed to. Thomas, the quiet boy who had been her reluctant partner during her first day, approached her after class with something approaching awe. "Is it true what people are saying about yesterday?" Maya gathered her books carefully before responding. "That depends on what people are saying. That you're some kind of martial arts expert. That you took on 3 girls and beat them without even breathing hard. I'm a wrestler, not a martial artist. And I didn't beat anyone, I defended myself when they left me no other choice." Thomas nodded solemnly. "Still, that's pretty incredible. I wish I could do something like that." Maya studied the earnest face of the boy who had struggled to make conversation with her just weeks before. "Wrestling isn't about hurting people, Thomas. It's about understanding your own capabilities and having the confidence to stand up for yourself when necessary. Would you ever consider teaching someone who gets picked on a lot?" The request caught Maya off guard. She had never considered herself a teacher, but she could see the genuine hope in Thomas's eyes. Here was someone who understood what it felt like to be targeted by stronger, more aggressive personalities. "I'm not really qualified to teach," Maya said slowly. "But if you're serious about learning to defend yourself, you should talk to Coach Daniels about joining the wrestling team." "You think she'd let me? I'm not exactly athletic." Maya smiled, remembering her own first tentative steps onto a wrestling mat. "Neither was I when I started. Wrestling isn't about being naturally athletic, it's about being willing to work harder than the person across from you." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Danny Chun, the sophomore who had thanked Maya after Ashley stopped targeting him. He approached with the careful respect of someone who understood what Maya had done for students like him. "Maya, I wanted to ask you something," Danny said, glancing around to make sure they wouldn't be overheard. "Some of the younger kids have been asking me about what happened yesterday. They want to know if it's true that someone finally stood up to Ashley's group." Maya frowned slightly. "What did you tell them?" "That they should focus on their own business and not worry about rumors." Danny paused. "But the truth is, some of these kids have been dealing with the same kind of treatment you were getting. They're hoping that maybe things will be different now." The weight of responsibility in Danny's words wasn't lost on Maya. She had never intended to become some kind of symbol or leader. She had simply reached a point where she refused to be victimized any longer. But she was beginning to understand that her actions had implications beyond her own situation. "Tell them that they don't need someone else to fight their battles," Maya said finally. "But also tell them that bullies lose their power when people stop being afraid of them." As Maya made her way to her second period chemistry class, she became aware of something else that had changed overnight. Ashley, Emma, and Jessica were nowhere to be seen. Their usual positions of prominence in the Hallway social dynamics had been abandoned, leaving a noticeable vacuum in the school's power structure. Coach Daniels was waiting for Maya when she entered the chemistry classroom, her expression thoughtful and slightly concerned. "Maya, I'd like to speak with you after class," Coach Daniels said quietly. "I think we need to discuss what happened yesterday." Maya's stomach tightened. She had expected that word of the gymnasium incident would eventually reach the faculty, but she had hoped for more time to figure out how to explain the situation. "Am I in trouble?" "That depends on your version of events," Coach Daniels replied carefully. "But I want you to know that I've already heard 3 different accounts of what supposedly happened, and I'd prefer to get the facts from someone I trust." Chemistry class proceeded normally, though Maya found it difficult to concentrate on molecular structures while anticipating her conversation with Coach Daniels. She kept replaying the previous day's events, trying to identify any actions she might have taken differently. When the class ended and other students filed out, Maya approached Coach Daniels' desk with the resignation of someone prepared to accept consequences for necessary choices. "So," Coach Daniels began, leaning back in her chair, "tell me what really happened yesterday afternoon." Maya recounted the events honestly, from Ashley's fake apology through the gymnasium confrontation and its resolution. She didn't minimize her own actions or try to portray herself as a victim, instead describing the tactical decisions she had made and the techniques she had employed. Coach Daniels listened without interruption, her expression growing more impressed with each detail of Maya's account. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Coach Daniels said when Maya finished. 3 students lured you to an isolated location with the intention of physically assaulting you, and you defended yourself using wrestling techniques that left them humbled but not seriously injured. That's accurate. And you showed enough restraint to avoid causing permanent damage despite having the skills to do so. I was taught that wrestling is about control, not destruction. Coach Daniels nodded slowly. "Maya, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Are you planning to report this incident to the administration?" Maya considered the question carefully. "I hadn't planned to, no. The situation resolved itself, and I don't think Ashley or her friends will be bothering me again." "That's probably true. But you should know that if this had been reported through official channels, you would likely face suspension despite acting in self-defense. Zero-tolerance policies don't always account for the complexities of real situations." Maya felt a chill of realization. "Are you saying I should have let them hurt me instead of defending myself?" "I'm saying that sometimes the right thing to do and the officially sanctioned thing to do are 2 different things." Coach Daniels leaned forward. "But I'm also saying that what you did yesterday showing restraint while protecting yourself demonstrated exactly the kind of character I look for in student athletes." "What do you mean?" "I mean that my offer for you to join our wrestling team still stands. In fact, after hearing about your tactical thinking and technical execution under pressure, I'm even more convinced that you could help elevate our entire program." Maya shook her head. "Coach, I appreciate the offer, but I promised my parents that you wouldn't look for trouble. But trouble found you anyway, and you handled it with exactly the kind of judgment and skill that makes me proud to be a wrestling coach." Coach Daniels stood up. "Maya, you can't hide from who you are. And more importantly, there are other students in this school who could benefit from your example." Before Maya could respond, there was a knock on the classroom door. Coach Daniels opened it to reveal Thomas and Danny Chun, both looking nervous but determined. "Coach Daniels," Thomas began hesitantly, "we were wondering if we could talk to you about joining the wrestling team." Coach Daniels glanced at Maya with a knowing smile. "Interesting timing. What made you boys suddenly interested in wrestling?" Danny stepped forward. "We heard that wrestling teaches you how to defend yourself without having to hurt other people. That it's about confidence and technique instead of just being tough." "And where did you hear that?" Coach Daniels asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Thomas gestured toward Maya. Maya was telling us about it. She said that wrestling could help people like us, people who get picked on, learn to stand up for ourselves. Maya felt a mixture of pride and anxiety as she realized that her words were already having an impact beyond what she had intended. These boys were looking for the same thing she had found in wrestling all those years ago, a way to transform vulnerability into strength. "I see," Coach Daniel said thoughtfully. "And Maya, what do you think about helping these young men understand what wrestling is really about?" Maya looked at Thomas and Danny, seeing reflections of her younger self in their earnest faces. She remembered the fear and helplessness that had driven her to that first wrestling practice, and the transformative power of discovering that she was capable of far more than she had ever imagined. "I think," Maya said slowly, "that everyone deserves to know what they're capable of when they stop accepting limits that other people place on them." Coach Daniels nodded approvingly. "In that case, I think we should discuss the possibility of you serving as an assistant coach while you're competing for our team. You could help develop our technique training while these boys and others learn the fundamentals." Maya felt the weight of decision pressing down on her. Joining the wrestling team would mean abandoning her promise to avoid complications, but it would also mean embracing the part of herself that had always been her greatest source of strength and confidence. "Can I think about it?" Maya asked. "Of course. But Maya, remember that sometimes the best way to honor a promise to stay out of trouble is to help others avoid the kind of trouble you've already overcome." As Maya left the chemistry classroom, she found herself thinking about the unexpected turn her life at Cedar Ridge High School had taken. What had begun as an attempt to remain invisible and avoid conflict had evolved into something entirely different, an opportunity to use her skills and experience to help others find their own strength. The halls buzzed with a different kind of energy now, as if the entire school had been waiting for someone to demonstrate that the established social hierarchies weren't as permanent as they had seemed. Students who had previously accepted their positions as victims or bystanders were beginning to ask different questions about what might be possible. Maya realized that her choice about joining the wrestling team wasn't just about her own future, it was about the kind of school Cedar Ridge High would become, and whether her demonstration of strength would inspire others to discover their own capabilities. The ripple effects of what had happened in the gymnasium were still spreading, and Maya was beginning to understand that she had a choice to make about whether she would guide those effects toward something positive, or simply let them unfold randomly. As she headed toward her next class, Maya caught sight of Ashley Winters at her locker, moving carefully and avoiding eye contact with other students. The former queen of the junior class looked smaller somehow, diminished by the loss of the fear-based respect that had defined her social status. But Maya also noticed something else. Several students who had previously given Ashley a wide berth were now walking past her without the automatic deference they had once shown. The change was subtle but unmistakable. Ashley's power to intimidate had been fundamentally undermined by her defeat in the gymnasium. Maya found herself hoping that Ashley would learn something valuable from the experience, rather than simply finding new ways to reassert dominance. Real change requires understanding, not just consequences. The final bell of the day was still hours away, but Maya could already sense that her time at Cedar Ridge High School was about to enter a completely different phase, one where her choices would matter not just for her own future, but for the culture of the entire school. 3 weeks after the gymnasium incident, Maya Shun stood at the edge of the wrestling mat in Cedar Ridge High School's athletic facility, watching Thomas execute a perfect sprawl defense against a takedown attempt from Danny. The transformation in both boys had been remarkable, not just in their physical capabilities, but in their confidence and posture as they moved through the school's hallways. Maya had ultimately accepted Coach Daniels' offer to join the wrestling team and serve as an assistant coach for newer members. The decision had required difficult conversations with her parents, who had initially been concerned about their daughter's involvement in any activity that might lead to more confrontations. But Dr. David Chun and Linda Chun had also recognized something important in their daughter's demeanor since she had started coaching. The quiet withdrawal that had characterized Maya's first weeks at Cedar Ridge had been replaced by purposeful engagement. She was using her skills not to dominate others, but to empower them. "Remember, Thomas," Maya called out as the two boys reset their positions. "Wrestling is about problem solving with your body. Every position has a solution. You just have to stay calm enough to find it." The wrestling room had become a sanctuary of sorts, not just for Maya but for a growing number of students who had found their way to the program through word-of-mouth recommendations. The group included not only Thomas and Danny, but also Maria Santos, a freshman who had been targeted for her accent, Kevin Walsh, a shy sophomore who had been dealing with online harassment, and surprisingly, Emma Rodriguez. Emma's arrival at wrestling practice 2 weeks earlier had shocked everyone, including Maya, the girl who had helped hold Maya's hands. While Ashley, prepared to strike them, now approached with genuine humility and a request that no one had expected. "I know I don't deserve to ask," Emma had said during their first private conversation, "but I want to learn what you know. Not so I can hurt people, but so I never have to be afraid of being hurt again." Maya had spent considerable time trying to understand Emma's motivations. Through careful questioning and observation, she had discovered that Emma's participation in Ashley's bullying had been driven largely by fear of becoming a target herself if she didn't maintain her position in the social hierarchy. "Fear makes people do terrible things," Maya had told Coach Daniels during one of their planning sessions. "But it also makes them capable of growth when they find better ways to feel safe." Now watching Emma work with Maria on basic defensive positions, Maya could see the genuine effort the former bully was putting into becoming someone different. Emma's natural athleticism and basketball background had translated well to wrestling fundamentals, but more importantly, she was developing empathy for students who faced the kind of intimidation she had once helped perpetrate. The wrestling program's growing reputation had attracted attention beyond the school itself. College recruiters who came to evaluate Maya's continued development often commented on the unique culture Coach Daniels and Maya had created, one that emphasized character development alongside athletic achievement. Maya's own skills had continued to sharpen through regular competition and training. Her technique remained flawless, but she had also developed new abilities in coaching and mentorship that complemented her wrestling prowess. College coaches from Colorado State had visited twice, expressing continued enthusiasm for Maya's upcoming enrollment while also praising her leadership qualities. But perhaps the most significant change at Cedar Ridge High School had been the gradual transformation of its social dynamics. The fear-based hierarchy that had once determined status and safety had begun giving way to something more complex and ultimately healthier. Students who had previously accepted bullying as an inevitable part of high school life were now more likely to seek help or stand up for themselves. The wrestling program had become a symbol of this change, but the effects extended far beyond the athletic facility. Ashley Winters represented the most complicated aspect of this transformation. In the weeks following her humiliation in the gymnasium, she had initially retreated into bitter isolation, nursing her wounded pride and plotting various forms of revenge that never materialized. Maya had observed Ashley carefully during this period, reading the micro-expressions and body language that revealed Ashley's internal struggle. The former queen of the junior class was grappling with the destruction of an identity that had been built entirely on her ability to intimidate others. The turning point had come during a school assembly about college preparation, when Ashley had approached Maya afterward with a request that surprised both of them. "I need to talk to you," Ashley had said, her voice lacking any trace of its former arrogance. "Privately." Their conversation had taken place in an empty classroom. with Ashley struggling to find words for thoughts she had never been forced to articulate before. "I've been thinking about what happened," Ashley had begun hesitantly. "And I realize that I don't actually know who I am when I'm not. When I'm not making other people afraid of me." Maya had listened without judgment as Ashley revealed the insecurities that had driven her aggressive behavior, pressure from demanding parents, fear of losing social status, and a deep-seated belief that she had to hurt others before they could hurt her. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Ashley had concluded. "But I wanted you to know that what happened in the gym showed me something about myself that I didn't want to see." Maya's response had been characteristically direct. "Forgiveness isn't something I can just decide to give you. But I can tell you that understanding why you acted the way you did is the first step toward becoming someone different." Ashley nodded, accepting the honest assessment without argument. "I don't know how to be different. I've been this person for so long that I don't know what else I could be." "Maybe," Maya had suggested carefully, "you could start by figuring out what you actually care about, instead of what you think you're supposed to care about to impress other people." That conversation had led to an unexpected development: Ashley's enrollment in a peer counseling program designed to help students work through interpersonal conflicts. She had also begun volunteering with younger students, using her natural leadership abilities in more constructive ways. The change in Ashley wasn't complete or perfect. She still struggled with impulses toward dominance and control, but it represented genuine effort toward personal growth. Maya had found herself cautiously optimistic that Ashley might eventually become the kind of leader who lifted others up rather than tearing them down. As Maya watched her wrestling students practice on this particular afternoon, she reflected on the unexpected path that had brought her to this moment. What had begun as a desperate attempt to avoid conflict had evolved into active leadership in creating positive change. Thomas successfully completed a reversal technique, escaping from a disadvantageous position and gaining control over his practice partner. His whoop of excitement echoed through the wrestling room, and Maya couldn't help but smile at the transformation from the scared, quiet boy she had first met. "Maya," Coach Daniels called from across the room, "could you demonstrate that hip toss sequence we discussed for the advanced group?" Maya nodded and moved to the center of the mat, where several of the more experienced wrestlers had gathered. As she began breaking down the technique, she was aware of the focused attention from her students, not the morbid curiosity she had once endured, but genuine respect for expertise earned through years of dedication. The hip toss demonstration led to questions about competition strategy, which evolved into a broader discussion about the mental aspects of wrestling. Maya found herself sharing insights about maintaining focus under pressure, reading opponents' intentions, and staying calm in chaotic situations. "The most important thing to remember," Maya concluded, "is that wrestling is ultimately about understanding yourself, your techniques, your limitations, your ability to adapt when things don't go according to plan. Everything else is just details." As practice wound down, Maya helped her students with equipment cleanup while Coach Daniels finalized preparations for their upcoming tournament. The team had grown significantly since Maya's arrival, and their performance had improved correspondingly. Emma approached Maya as they finished sacking mats. "I wanted to thank you," she said quietly, "for giving me a chance to be part of this, even after what I did." Maya studied Emma's face, seeing genuine gratitude and continued determination to be better. Everyone deserves the opportunity to grow beyond their worst moments. "But Emma, the real work happens when no one is watching, when you have to choose between old patterns and new ones." "I know, and I'm trying to make better choices, even when it's difficult." Maya nodded approvingly. "That's all any of us can do." As students began leaving the wrestling room, Maya remained behind to help Coach Daniels with final preparations. The two had developed a strong working relationship built on mutual respect and shared commitment to using athletics as a vehicle for character development. "Maya," Coach Daniel said as they finished organizing equipment. "I've been thinking about next year after you graduate and head to Colorado State." "What about it?" "I'd like to formalize the coaching structure we've developed. Create an official mentorship program where experienced wrestlers help develop younger athletes, not just in technique but in the kind of character building you've exemplified." Maya considered the proposal thoughtfully. "You think it would continue without me here?" "I think you've already planted seeds that will keep growing. Thomas, Danny, Emma, Maria, they're all developing the same combination of technical skill and personal integrity. That makes you such an effective leader. They'll be able to pass that on to the next generation of students." The idea of leaving a lasting positive impact at Cedar Ridge High School appealed to Maya in ways she was still learning to understand. When she had first arrived as a scared transfer student trying to avoid attention, she had never imagined that her presence might fundamentally change the school's culture. As Maya gathered her belongings and prepared to leave the wrestling room, she paused at the trophy case that lined one wall. Among the awards and championship photos was a new addition, a team photo from their recent regional tournament, where Cedar Ridge had performed better than they had in years. In the photo, Maya stood with her teammates, her expression confident, but not arrogant. Surrounding her were the faces of students who had found strength they didn't know they possessed, guided by someone who understood what it meant to transform vulnerability into power. The drive home gave Maya time to reflect on the journey that had brought her to this point. The girl who had once sat alone in cafeterias, enduring harassment while trying to remain invisible, had become someone who actively shaped her environment rather than simply enduring it. Her parents had noticed the change as well. Dr. Chun had commented on Maya's increased confidence during family conversations, while Linda Chen had observed that her daughter seemed to have found a sense of purpose that extended beyond her own immediate concerns. That evening, as Maya completed her homework and prepared for another day at Cedar Ridge High School, she received a text message that brought a smile to her face. It was from Colorado State's wrestling coach, confirming details for an upcoming campus visit and expressing continued excitement about Maya's potential contributions to their program. But the message that meant the most came from Thomas. "Thank you for teaching me that being strong doesn't mean making other people weak." Maya set her phone aside and looked out her bedroom window at the Colorado mountains rising in the distance. In a few months, she would be starting a new chapter of her life, one that would bring new challenges and opportunities for growth. But she would be leaving Cedar Ridge High School as a fundamentally different person than the one who had arrived there months earlier. More importantly, she would be leaving behind a community that had been changed by her present students who had learned to stand up for themselves and others, a wrestling program that emphasized character alongside competition, and a social environment where fear-based hierarchies had given way to something more positive. The quiet transfer student who couldn't hear the sound of her own voice had found ways to make her impact felt that went far beyond anything she could have imagined. And in doing so, she had discovered that true strength wasn't about dominating others. It was about empowering them to discover their own capabilities. Maya Chun had arrived at Cedar Ridge High School as a victim trying to avoid conflict. She would be leaving as a leader who had shown others how to transform their own struggles into sources of strength and purpose. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.